Welcome to Forbidden Planet TV, where I'm Andrew Sumner. It's my privilege to be joined today by the one and only Ben Aaronovich and the one and only Andrew Cartmel.
Yeah.
How are you guys?
Great.
I'm fine, thank you.
It's lovely to see you both, and thanks for joining me. We're here to talk about the upcoming special writers edition graphic novel of your first comic book series for Rivers of London, Bodywork, which is publishing on the 6th of July at the moment, and which everybody watching this can order from the links attached to this interview.
By a strange coincidence.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it's 5 years since the original iteration of the Bodywork graphic novel was first published. What was it like to return for this special writers edition? Did you enjoy the experience? Did you enjoy reacquainting yourself with the material? Did you find yourself wishing you'd done things differently? How was it for you guys?
I know Andrew had a good time correcting all the mistakes all the spelling mistakes in the scripts if they were going to go out in front of other people. We went, no, that's embarrassing, no. So that was it was interesting. I mean, I'm not a great one for going back to work. Anyone will tell you I hate doing revisions. So this is a little bit like go back and do revisions on something that you thought you'd finished. So I had that kind of psychological barrier to overcome. And Andrew's a playwright, you see, and the playwrights are always tinkering with their work. It's like the besetting sin of all playwrights is that they will always go back and work. So I don't know, Andrew, did you like going back to?
The main thing about that book was that before I became a professional writer of comics, I loved getting scripts for comics, like Alan Moore's scripts. So, and some of those were published, as books of script from some of his comic series. So I was really delighted that they were going to do that for us, not least because, especially when I write the scripts, but especially when Ben writes the scripts, there's lots of stuff in there that never ends up on the page, including some great witty gags and also some wonderful descriptions. So the scripts are in themselves a work of art, I feel. I do think that they have a legitimacy in their own right, and they would never have seen the light of day otherwise. So my main reaction was just delight that it was happening.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, Andrew, because one of the editors on the project within Titan HQ, David Leach, one of his comments / questions was exactly that. And I know that he thinks that the scripts for the series are fantastically detailed and filled with scores of interesting reference and notes for the artist. And it was one of the things that he's been banging on about and has been so enthusiastic about bringing this version of the book together is exactly that.
Well, yeah, and it doesn't happen that often, but I could imagine that some people write comic strips where the description is really bone minimum and you don't get anything extra. But certainly the way that we write scripts, there's lots of fun to be had seeing the original account. It's almost, it's sort of moving towards prose in a way, especially when Ben does it, because as I say, there's some really good gags in there that otherwise would never see the light of day.
Yeah. No, I think it's wonderful to be able to see them. What was the original inspiration for the story of Bodywork?
Well, I don't know how Ben would answer that, but I wanted to write a story that was somewhat in the vein of a 50s EC horror comic. And originally it was going to be much more full-on horror, but it became, we fell in love with the characters. So for instance, Debden, who's the dodgy auto dealer, was supposed to end up dismembered. Like the idea was that he breaks down cars into parts and the same thing would happen to him, which is a classic EC horror comic gag. But when we came to it, we just liked the guy too much. So so that was sort of one of the initial impulses, but it soon drifted away from that.
I remember all we had to start with is that I sat down and I wrote the first page. I thought, yeah, it goes in, and then there's like Beverly, and there's that line, which is like, life is something that goes on, and unfortunately, so is death. And I thought, yay, that's brilliant. I have no idea what happens next. And then Andrew came along and went, well, why is this guy in the water? And he filled in the idea of what the car was doing in the water, and sort of like that's where we went. He came up with the whole notion that the cars were possessed and how they got possessed, and then it starts to get confused because we're batting the ideas backwards and forwards. You definitely came up with the haunted car, the haunted Bentley. I remember that because thinking, oh, that's brilliant. My main contribution, I think, is the book at the end where where Molly is driving the car. As far as I can tell, that was my main contribution to the rest of this.
No, there was much more than that. But by the way, for cat fanciers in the audience, that was my cat's cat flap and my cat's meow just now. Very important. Yeah, Ben, I think you wrote that one pager even before we had a contract with Titan. I think you just decided you just wanted to write a page of comics. It was just something that came to you. Is that right?
I remember I wanted to write comics because we've always wanted to write comics, and you have written comics. And
Yeah.
I suddenly woke up one morning and went, I think I might be able to leverage someone into letting us write comics, Rivers of London comics. And because I hadn't written comics, I knew that, publishers like to play safe. They'd want someone who actually knew what they were doing as part of the team. So I said, Andrew, do you want to go write comics? And he said, okay. And then Titan said, yeah, we'll do it. It was like they were much more enthusiastic than we came in with like all these arguments as to why we should do it and how we were the best people to do it. And we just like literally did that thing where you push against an open door and go.
It was an easy win for you guys, I'm sure.
Yeah.
It was amazing. We started going, oh, okay. Well, if we'd known it was going to be that easy, we'd have done it 10 years ago.
Yeah, but I'd forgotten that it was that one page, and that one page was just written on spec without us having a contract or anything. And that actually was the seed of the whole comic. Because Guy was in the car, I got the notion of possessed and haunted cars. And that really, it all did flow from that. But it was just interesting that you did that one page, and it was a good little one pager. And I'm so pleased that turned into a whole work.
Alan Moore, wasn't it? It was very Alan, because we're both big fans of Alan Moore. So it was like
these early funny comics.
Yes, yeah. Early funny. It was like there she is as pretty as a picture, which I quote every time we do an interview. But I think that was the influence, the
from Watchmen.
Yeah, from Watchmen, where you contrast backwards and forwards. I like the potential of what you could do with comics. But if you read Bodywork, it's very much like our first stab. Because we're much more assured as we go in later comics, because you can just see us going tentatively kind of. Bits of it you go, like there's the art shift. Remember the art shift?
Do you want to tell the folks what an art shift is?
Yeah, so an art shift is when you deliberately change the way a picture is written.
The style of the artist,
of the art. And I thought, we'll do this art shift where it's like a pulp novel, and we describe the story of her pouring water into her boyfriend's car. This is a main plot point in X.
To sabotage it, yeah.
And I thought, we'll do it like a pulp novel. He did her wrong and she did in his car, right? And in the style of a pulp novel, and it works, but it really should have been like a splash page. We really should have done it as a gigantic splash page with with the proper writing and everything all over it.
Yeah, like with a logo on it, Spicy Stories. Yeah, like a pulp magazine.
Like a revenge tale from a. And now we would have known to do that. We would have actually calculated. We couldn't have done that because we didn't have enough room in that issue to do that, but. Now we would have gone, yes, we will do that as a whole. We would have worked towards that. So we will do that as a splash page. So you turn over the page. We would have calculated it so you turn over the page, and there it was. And all the other things that you kind of learn from the experience. So I find, when I'm looking at Bodywork, I'm thinking, terrible when you look back at your work and you think, that was a missed opportunity. That was a missed opportunity. All that could have done that. We did a lot of really good stuff, especially Andrew, I thought, did a lot of really good stuff in the kind of latter third, the last third of it, where all the stuff about the haunted, the haunted, what do you call it?
The guys from the 1920s, maybe?
Yeah, the guys from the 1920s, but also just the research, because I'm famous for doing research, but Andrew went out and found out all the.
I'm famous for not doing research.
Well, he used to poo-poo research, but
this was in the pre-internet days. The internet has made the research almost painless.
So
almost delightful.
And a lot of the locations, like because he's the South London boy of us, he kind of he knew where the visually interesting locations.
Oh, all the Putney Bridge stuff, yeah, that was lovely. It was a great location, and it was just, I used to go there a couple of times a week.
Yeah, so it was and we've been down there. I actually sent my son down to take photographs of it for this issue, because I can't remember why we were using photographs.
It's because the photo reference we used was off Google, and therefore we couldn't reprint it. We didn't have permission to reprint it.
So we sent my son out. He went on quite a nice tour of South London with a camera, taking photographs of the various locations, to match the ones, carefully matching them to the original pictures. That was a lot of fun. And so Andrew brought a lot of did all of that, quite a lot of kind of assurance to the kind of like the what I call the bread and butter, which is the hardest part of all writing, is the bread and butter, right? Anyone can go, I shall put icing on the top, but it's like the actual kind of like the kind of the actual cake making is actually the difficult bit, getting the cake to rise. That's the actual difficult bit of writing both novels and scripts and comics, and I'm eternally grateful to be able to lean on Andrew. I don't know what happens next. Yes, we shall find a plot that works.
Well, we were finding our way, because I remember we had the whole first issue nailed down in outline, and I suddenly realized that we didn't have Nightingale. So we did this really easy fix where he turns up as the splash page at the very end as a big reveal. So that was quickly.
That was yours.
Now, I specifically want to ask you something about Nightingale, because there's a sense that Nightingale, I think when you read the book, that Nightingale rather is vastly more powerful than he seems. So his relationship with the Folly and also Molly is fascinating. Is that the case? What's your feeling about that character?
Well, Nightingale is vastly more powerful than he seems. A lot of the characters in Rivers of London are much more powerful than they seem. People are constantly underestimating Peter Grant, apart from anything else. But Nightingale is the greatest wizard currently living in the world, anywhere, right? Bar none, because he's had like 90 years to get really, really good at it. And he hasn't done anything else, you know. And he really likes it. He likes magic. That's the whole point about, we're working on a comic now, to reference back from Monday, which is the next issues that are coming out, and we go into a little bit of Nightingale's school days, and we see Nightingale as this young man. He's just really good at magic. Just really likes doing magic. He doesn't like doing sport, like magic, cricket, and rugby, and that's it. He's not interested in the kind of the whys and the wherefores. He's got a friend who's much like Peter, who's much more interested in the whys and the wherefores. He's not interested. He's just interested in kind of getting up there, doing the stuff. That's Nightingale, and as a result, he's very, very, very good. And similarly, Beverly's much more powerful than she seems. All of these characters are very, very much more powerful. The only person who's not is Debden, probably, poor sod. He's quite a good mechanic, though.
And something you were touching upon before was your process with regard to Andrew's research, what Andrew brought to the party for this book. It seems to me that one of the great things about this particular book is there's a strong element of reality running through it. And so, you're dealing with magic and you're dealing with a homicidal possessed car, but it feels very real at the same time. And that level, it's almost that the magic is kind of almost mundane or routine in a way, if that makes sense.
Well, there's two reasons that we get away with it seeming real. One is good use of real locations, which obviously comes from the novels themselves. But we mentioned taking photos and everything, so that the comics take place in a very recognizable London. The other thing is the characters are very real. Both Ben and I love bringing characters properly to life, even if they're tiny bit part players. Like there's Rule in this. There's the guy with the paisley scarf. He's a minor character, but he was definitely a full-blown character, and that's true just about everybody in it. And that sort of thing really does give a patina of reality to your story.
Yeah. What we like to do is we like to think that you could follow any one of our minor characters off screen, and they would still be an interesting three-dimensional character, and you would walk off screen. So it's just an accident we happen to be following Peter, and of course the other great thing about comics is you're not always following Peter. In the novels you're always following Peter, but in the comics you can just go, I will go over here and see what Nightingale does in the morning. What's Nightingale up to? What's he doing? What are these people doing?
With regard to those well-written and well-rounded characters, outside of the obvious, do you have any particular favorites, both of you, from this book?
Well, I love there's two sisters in it. And I love the sister who's got like these two kind of losers who hang out with her, because she's really good looking and glamorous and quite wealthy. And we've all known those sort of guys who are never going to get the girl into bed, but they're always hanging around and very useful to her for carrying her shopping and stuff. And I just felt that they were a real little triangle there just seemed to me very real. And I just like that. I like the dynamic of it.
I like Debden. I just a very small part, but I like the woman who sabotaged her boyfriend's car and starts the whole thing. I just like the bit where she just like the whole interrogation bit, which we worked very hard on, because we wanted to. You talk about the realism, but we wanted to show like real police work. So we didn't want the police work to become suddenly subordinate to the action sequences just because we changed medium. So we tried to find ways of portraying in comics the interview situation. When you think it's incredibly, for a comic, it's an incredibly static thing where you have like people standing there, sitting there opposite each other on a table, kind of like arguing. And she helped sell that by being, amazingly kind of clueless. And and that was a very useful character. And I'm kind of very fond of her. And her poor, long-suffering Brief, who says at one point goes,
yeah, facepalm Brief, right?
Face palms when she kind of just comes out and admits to doing it in front of him. I just love. I find that really funny. So I like those little mini characters that come in for like 5-6 frames, do their piece and get off. I like that. I like Debden, obviously, because otherwise he'd be dead.
He's actually going to be in the books, isn't he?
Yes, and
wonderful.
Well, he gets a lot of references, but he's the mechanic, you see. So it's like, I had the car done up by Debden. I keep waiting for him to do a walk on, and he hasn't done a walk on yet. But the four toffs that Andrew came up with for the Putney,
from the Folly, yeah.
For the Folly scenes, they were great. Yes, I said, "Oh, they're toffs," and he came up with wonderful, and that was like wonderfully done by Lee when he kind of gave one a top hat and a monocle. Really.
Yeah, like Mr. Peanut. Yeah, but I've always said that half the battle is to give a character an interesting name. I mean, some people wouldn't even bother naming a character if they're just there for a page, but you should always name them, always give them an interesting name, because then they begin to come gradually to life, I find.
Well, there's two things. An interesting name, and then you have the Blake Snyder, which is the limp in the eye patch.
With distinguishing traits.
Yes, distinguishing traits. The hash doesn't have to be a limp and an eye patch, but it means that you can always know who it is. When you go back, like an issue later, you recognize them, rather than having to be reminded.
As a footnote here, Blake Snyder's a screenwriting guru. But talking about characters bringing them to life, and Debden, when he didn't end up dismembered in issue 1, he began to do stuff like he would ask Molly out. And that was a classic scene, because I was going to have him go and ask Molly out. Molly like to show him her mouthful of fangs, right? And Ben said, no, just have them go through a door together, close the door, then have them come out looking pale. And it was way better. So that's a classic case of the kind of back and forth we had, and a great steer from Ben.
Yeah. No, that's wonderful. I was gonna close out by asking you actually how hands-on you were with Lee during the art process, how much back and forth it was between you guys.
Well, that was we've never had a relationship as collaborative as we did with Lee, because we would actually contact Lee directly, and we were all in the loop with him. Now, when we want to deal with the artist, it always goes to the editor, which is fine, but it's not the same kind of close contact. And we were very, very deeply involved in terms of the detail with Lee.
Yeah, I think it was very important establishing, because I mean, for the later artists, we can always go, well, it's like Lee, isn't it? We're looking for this kind of realistic style, so we can point to Lee's work and say this is the kind of, not that it has to be in his style, but that we're looking for something that
can convey an equally grounded sense of reality, so that then the magic can take off from that. That's
once you establish that, and the other artists don't necessarily, they kind of pick up on the ethos behind the actual that you're aiming for. And we've had some good artists. We've got a particularly good one at the moment, I think. Is
Mariano Lacustra, he was really good too.
And the particular, but I mean, the thing is that you have to accept when you get a new artist that they're a different artist, and so therefore do not do things.
Well, you've always been very good about that, about giving people breathing space. And even if somebody does something that you disagree with, you think that another creative artist should be allowed to do things their own way, to an extent, obviously not to completely violate your approach, but you're willing to accept something that isn't entirely what you wanted, because you want to give them creative freedom, because they need that.
Yeah, but also because you want them, like, if someone's doing 22 pages, they're doing 22 pages in something like a month. They have to be able to do it in their own style. If you try and force them to do it in somebody else's style, it makes it much harder, because they've got to do, especially in something like ours, where we have like 9 to 10 identifiable faces that have to be consistent all the way through an issue. If you look at it, we have a tremendously large number of characters, and they're not wearing masks or wearing great big emblems on their chests or things to identify them. And so therefore, they are actually having to be identified through little things like their faces or their uniforms and things like that. So you need to allow your artists to be comfortable with their characters in order to be able to replicate them in a kind of naturalistic way.
It's a very sensible approach, but I think we both know that there's many people who don't take that sensible approach and lean too heavily on their collaborators.
Yes, I mean, you know, so I'm also once with Lee, we started to learn what Lee was good at and started slanting our stories so that they would be like, you know, so we thought, right, Lee is really good at cars and animals. Let's do something with lots of cars and animals.
We found that it was the other way around. We hadn't to do a splash page which had both Canada geese and the detailed diagram of a BMW engine on it, and it turns out that he'd been trained in both those areas,
which was brilliant. And you can see that's in issue 1. It's the splash page. It is just rather brilliant, that splash page. I mean, much better than I even imagined it in my head, which is not usually the case.
These 2 areas of specialty, drawing car engines and animals. It was brilliant. Yeah.
I think that is a great note to close out on. Actually, I actually love Lee's artwork, so I think in homage to that is a great place to end. Thank you for your candor. About Bodywork's the Deluxe Writers Edition, which you can order from the links attached to this interview. And Andrew and Ben, it's lovely to see you again, guys. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, take care. All the very best. Bye-bye.
Bye.
If you're enjoying watching Forbidden Planet TV and you're enjoying watching us talk to the world's most interesting and accomplished filmmakers, authors, artists, musicians, creators, subscribe right here. See you soon.